We have an exciting day today. We have an event that is going to take us in a new direction. STN is going in a new direction. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Dr. Doug Pfeiffer. I've been a resident of this community for 40 years. And we came here, we moved here, because we felt it was a great place to raise our children. At that time, we didn't lock our doors. We didn't have to worry about our cars being locked. That was a long time ago. And a lot has changed since then, as you know. We've had a lot change just since 2020. And I had a conversation earlier, and I spoke to a young lady and explained to her that some of those changes are never going to go back the way they were. There are changes in health. There are changes in the way we do business, the way we work, where we get our food, a number of things. So I want you to understand who STN is as well. And I really think that it's important that you recognize why we are here and why we started. The idea for STN was a seed planted in me. And I decided that with everything that we saw going on during COVID, the number one thing that I recognized was division. The opposition was using division to separate us. And it's the first way you gain control, through division. So I felt that we needed a way to unite people. And so I got a small core group of individuals together who were like-minded, and we decided that we were going to start having meetings and present information. But it was difficult because we had to find a truth, and that's a challenging thing. And we were able to bring people together, we were able to unite them, and we were able to gain an opportunity to educate people. And so that was the beginning of who we are. We have 3 core values, and we feel very strongly about those core values. We have, first of all, a biblical foundation, and that draws us all together. And that's the rock that we stand on, and we will not waver from that rock. We also have a second core value, which is our constitutional framework. The laws that this constitutional republic were started upon are the bedrock for our civil society. Unfortunately, we're seeing that broken every single day. We are a constitutional republic, one of the only ones in the world. That's why we lead this world. The third core value we have is education. And our belief is that that educational core value ties all the other core values together. We must educate biblically. We must educate constitutionally. Beyond that, everything else is, as I like to say, fluff. Because those are the only things that really matter. We are a 501c4 nonprofit corporation. STN is morphing. We're changing. And I'm going to talk at the end of the night about how those changes are affecting not only us, but are caused by what's going on in our society and our culture. We are unique in this respect. We are not just a political organization. There are many patriot groups out there, and I'll share a quick story with you as I get started. We had an individual in leadership in STN when we first started who sent a scathing email to our state senator, who was a friend of mine, who I had had a relationship for the last 40 years. And it was highly offensive. And I said, I'm going to have to go straighten this out. So I went and met with him and explained to him that the terminology that was used was not accurate and was inflammatory, because I really didn't think he was a communist. But he ignored me when I walked in the room, by the way. His first comment to me is, you and all those other patriot groups are, and he was going to carry on, and I stopped him. And I said, whoa, 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 first of all, we are not one of those patriot groups. So I want you to understand that right up front. While we believe that it's important that individuals are educated about what's going on politically, our job is to educate. Our job is to motivate. Our job is to get people off the bench to do something. So after our conversation, he came along and actually became a strong supporter of STN and what we do. But as a nonprofit, a 501c4, and with the trajectory of our organization changing, we are going to be hosting larger events than we ever did before, although we've had some pretty large ones with some of the churches in the community, one of which we're in today, who has been a strong supporter of what we do. But we are going to be having probably 2 to 3, possibly 4 large events per year. Those events cost us, and we are dependent completely upon the donations of those who support what we're doing. And I say that to you only because each and every one of you who is here today paid to be here. That's something new for us too. But in order to have the caliber of speakers that we are having today, that's a necessary thing for us now. So I appreciate your support in being here. I appreciate your support in purchasing a ticket to be here. And I appreciate your support in anything else that you can donate or contribute to STN, whether that's your talents, whether that's your treasures, whatever it is, we appreciate you. And we do have some wonderful volunteers that I will talk about at the end of the night as well. Tonight, we have 2 individuals with us who are amazing people. And I'll share another story with you. I had a criticism relative to our speaker tonight. Had to go to bat for you, by the way. And the criticism was, the information that's going to be presented is all public knowledge. It's there. I said, really? I said, you realize you have to dig pretty deep for that information, first of all. Secondly, you have to put it all together. Third, you have to make it into a palatable source of information for people to understand. I said, are you going to do that? Because I don't have time to do that, but I know somebody who's done it, so we're going to get him here. And he knuckled under finally and said, okay. Even if he hadn't, we would have had the majority anyway. But 2 individuals are here today. Seth Keshel is going to be speaking in just a moment. But Rachel Kessel is his lovely wife who I just met tonight. And Rachel has stepped up to the bat, and she is a state representative in Arizona, representing, you ready? I'm going to hear the moans next, Maricopa County. There you go. So Rachel has some stories to tell us, and Seth is going to edify us relative to what's going on here. Now, you're going to see a lot about Montgomery County, but Seth is also going to touch on some of the other surrounding counties, and that's one of the blessings we have with where we're located here, because we touch 4 different counties right where we are, and we have individuals who come out. Some of you probably are from either Bucks, Berks, probably Montgomery, but maybe Lehigh, which is where I live. So we have the opportunity to spread the word in multiple areas from our location. And tonight, you're going to have the opportunity to hear from individuals who have a great deal of wonderful, wonderful knowledge about what's going on. But as we get started tonight, as we always do with everything STN, we're going to have a prayer. And that prayer is going to come from a good friend of mine and probably the strongest supporter in the church community, although we have others, for STN and what we do. Pastor John Decker has been a blessing to us as well. And the opportunity to use his beautiful facility here is an example of that blessing. I called this morning, or texted, to see if it would be okay if I put some banners up out front. I didn't want to step on toes. I didn't want to do anything that was inappropriate. And John's response to me, Pastor Decker's response to me was, sure, almost like, why are you even asking? That's the kind of support we have from this pastor who is doing what he needs to from the pulpit, as opposed to so many other pastors that aren't. So, John, if you'd be kind enough to lead us off in prayer, I would appreciate it greatly.
At first, I thought, man, who's he talking about? Wow. But thank you. We really appreciate Doug and Dr. Doug, I should say. It kind of sounds like if this was a group of young people, Dr. Doug, that sounds like a rapper almost nowadays. Anyway, let's stand. Let's pray together. And thank you so much. So it's an honor to be here today, and I look forward to what going to take place. And it's exciting. We live in exciting times. We could look at it like, oh, what in the world is going on? And this is so bad. But what an opportunity we have, because we can make a difference. How many believe that? Come on, we can make a difference, can't we? Come on, that's why we're here. We believe, absolutely, our freedoms come from God to us, and we give them to those that we've placed in Washington, D.C. and in Harrisburg. And we are the citizens of a blessed and favored nation. And there are things that are wrong in this nation right now, but we're on duty on our watch, and I believe God wants to use all of us to make a difference in this nation. So let's pray together. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for your goodness, your grace. Lord Jesus, may we be like your word tells us in Proverbs 28:1. The wicked run away when no one is chasing them, but the godly are as bold as lions. May we be that today. May we be bold in our faith, in truth and love. Bless this afternoon, this evening. Thank you for our guests that are here. Thank you for Dr. Doug and the Shield of Truth. And we believe that we're going to be encouraged and challenged and blessed today. Thank you. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. You may be seated.
Well, Rachel, I'm going to hand it over to you and allow you to edify us about what you've experienced.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having us all the way out from Arizona. And what does a state representative from Arizona have to do with all of you Pennsylvania folks? Well, I'll tell you, we have two of the probably most corrupt swing states in our nation as far as elections go. So I actually think I have a lot in common with you, unfortunately. So, I'll start just by telling you a little bit about myself, because I never, ever had it on my to-do list to be a politician. Honestly, I have to kind of spit that word out of my mouth a little bit still, because when you think of politicians, it kind of gives you a sickly feeling in your stomach, because as American citizens, we have watched our government just go more and more down the toilet, in my opinion. And they have forgotten, a lot of our elected officials have forgotten, we're in charge of our government, we the people. And they get in there in their cushy jobs, whether it's state or federal. And I'll tell you right now, from the first day I started as a freshman 2 terms ago, I'm in my 2nd term, I must be insane, I actually ran again. But when I got in there as a freshman, I realized very quickly it was the lobbyists running the show. The special interests were constantly trying to get the new legislators, and that's even at the state level. And we can all look at the DC level and see it's that much worse, but it's happening at the state level. So a group of people like you that are here, you're obviously very involved. I love coming and speaking to groups like this because you understand it's time to take your government back. And God does use every single one of us to do that. And the fact that you have a pastor here and an individual here who has started a group where the first principle they have is the Bible. Because we're losing that very quickly. Our churches not being involved is the main reason we're where we're at these days. And I go every day, every new session, I have all these plans to run legislation that's pro-life, run those types of things. But I can't do anything as long as the churches are being quiet about those topics, because we cannot change hearts and minds with legislation. The church has to change hearts and minds first, and then maybe legislators like myself can get somewhere with legislation. We're doing this backwards in a way. But going back to how I got involved in this crazy world of politics, which let me tell you, I have 5 children. I thought they gave me gray hair, and I went into politics and realized my kids had nothing on politics. But every gray hair has been worth it to fight for my constituents and to give people just like you hope that if we can get people in these seats that understand this, that have Constitution first, every time I look at a piece of legislation, I ask myself, is this constitutional? That's the first question I ask. And then I ask myself, is it the proper role of government? Because we're supposed to be small government people, and a lot of your elected officials have forgotten that. So that's my second question, and is it good policy? Those are the 3 things I gauge things on. Now, as far as my 5 kids, that is who got me involved in politics. After the 2020 election, how many of you think that that was the most fair, free and fair election that's ever occurred? Okay, I figured I was in good company here. So after I saw what happened with the 2020 election, I looked at my 5 children and I saw the direction that our country was going, and I could not believe it. I was devastated looking at this. This is America, and it did not seem like that when we watched that election get ripped off, quite frankly. And so I decided I was going to do something about it. Now, all of you sitting here today, one thing I will tell you, if you feel pulled to run for office, do it. If you feel called to pray for your elected officials, please do that, because that is probably the most important thing you can do for us. Every time I'm having a moment in politics, or I'm questioning, why, God, do you have me here when I'm barely making a dent? Someone will call me or text me or look at me into my face and say, I've been praying for you. And I feel it. We feel it. So keep those prayers going up for people involved. But in 2020, I never ever thought I'd be standing here today, like I said, as a politician. But I was looking at what was going on and I couldn't believe it. And so I got elected as a grassroots candidate. And let me tell you, the establishment, and I'm going to have to correct you. Maricopa's bad. Who here has heard of Pima County? Tucson. That's where I'm at. I represent Pima County. Our recorder has she, her on her profile, and she is a very outright Democrat activist. That's Pima County. Even worse than Maricopa. Did you think it could get worse? Pima's worse. So in 2022, myself and 2 other people, we were running against the establishment, our own. We never ever thought that the battle would be within our own party. I was very gullible when I went in there. And we actually, in our Republican primary, we ran against an unrepentant retired abortion doctor in our Republican primary. And we were shunned for speaking out against her. And I knew at that very moment, there's so much more to this than what I thought. We are in the spiritual battle of our lives right now. And we got President Trump back in there this time, but you know what? He's not going to be there forever. And we have to keep that in mind as we move forward. Now, I'm very happy we got him back in there and everybody kept fighting, because I was a little bit worried that we would get him back in and everyone would go back to sleep like so many of us were. I was spending my time yelling at the television. So I decided, let's do something else other than griping and complaining, and that's why I ran for office. So we defeated all odds and we got in there as grassroots. I'm very, very honored to be an Arizona Freedom Caucus member. But let me tell you, we battle the establishment every day in the legislature. Our budget fight this year, it's kind of like, I have 5 kids, but 3 of my kids were adopted. So I gave birth to 2, but you have a baby, the last thing you ever want to think about, again, women in here, is having another baby right after the fact. After this budget this year, I was like, I'm not running again. But it just reminded me kind of that. So I'll give it a little time. But it's a battle. It's a battle. We're in a battle right now. But those of you here, like I said, that are here for a reason, because I feel that you see that you're here trying to figure out what's my part in that battle. And you inspire me. You inspire people like me and people like Seth to keep fighting, because it's a fight every day. The media hates my guts. Some of my own colleagues hate my guts, because I stand up and I point out where they're failing you all the time. But as you gear up for another election in 26, because after 2020, it got a lot of us involved. Then 2022 happened in Arizona. How many of you have heard of Kari Lake? Exactly. That race got stolen from her. Kari Lake should have been our governor in Arizona. So we had to go to Plan B when we got Katie Hobbs instead. And Kari Lake, God is using her in a different way. But I realized there are so many things that we have to keep fighting for, because as Seth will explain, if we don't correct our elections, I always am careful not to say fix our elections, because our elections are already kind of fixed, but correct our elections. I really believe that is the civil rights issue of our time. For example, currently, I just wrote a letter to the Attorney General in Arizona. Now, she won her seat by a few hundred votes against Abraham Hamadeh. They left over 9,000 provisional ballots uncounted in that race. And the Democrat won the seat. Now, Democrats are better than us, Republicans, in a lot of ways, because even though she barely won, and I'll say won because she didn't, she should not be our Attorney General, won that seat, she has every step of the way, every minute since, she has used that office as a weapon against Republicans. I just sent her a letter. Actually, one of my staffers was worried she's going to do the same to me now. But you know what? You have to be as bold as lions. The pastor just said that. You can't step back from these people and let them continue to walk all over us, the people of the United States. But I actually had a Democrat colleague of mine, believe it or not, and this is to give you hope. And I do want to leave you with hope today, because sometimes we look around and things just always seem crazy. We get a victory here, and then something else happens, and we feel defeated again. But that's why hope in one man is not good. Hope in God is the only thing we have, and we have to remember that in this battle. But as far as my Democrat colleague, she actually messaged me, and she said, "Does this look like ballot harvesting to you?" And she showed me some screenshots. And because she was afraid that her own party would retaliate against her, she asked me to file the complaint with the AG. So I will tell you, there are Democrats that are coming around, and they're seeing that 2/3 of Americans do not trust our elections anymore. And I've met them in Arizona. So that's why we have to fight, regardless of any fears we might have that we're going to be retaliated against, or whatever the case may be. And we have to know that this is not just a Republican issue anymore. What Seth is going to talk about is an American citizen issue. A lot of us are sick and tired of not trusting that our very, very sacred vote counts in our elections. That is the one thing we have, where we have a voice and we get to choose who represents us. And if we feel like that has been taken away from us, what do we have? That's why it is the issue of our time. So we fight. I'm very, very honored during this fight to have met my wonderful husband, who you will get to meet shortly. I don't have the bad dad jokes like him, but be warned, I did warn you about that when it's his turn to come up here and speak. But I think I just want to, like I said, I want to make you feel hopeful today. Because sometimes it seems that we make all of this progress and then somehow it goes backwards. That's at least what I feel, even being in my position in the state legislature in Arizona. But if we don't continue forward and continue to fight, we just hand it to the people that are trying to take our country from us. And that is not an option as far as I'm concerned. So let's leave today feeling hopeful for our future. Let's remember that Donald Trump, as President Donald Trump, he's doing great things for our country, but he only has a certain amount of time to do that. So it's up to all of us in this room to continue that when he's gone, to continue fighting for those candidates that you know are not going to go in there and sell you out, because that's exactly what they do. Another real quick story, my very first session, 3 days in, I was told by leadership I needed to tone down my Twitter. That was what she said to me. And I said, no, I will not. It's my First Amendment right. I'm going to speak truth. 2 weeks later, she told me again, can you please tone it down? You're really making the lobbyists nervous. I said, great. And I wear that as a badge of honor because the lobbyists still hate my guts. I'm probably enemy number one. But in all seriousness, be bold in truth. That is the best thing we can do. Keep fighting. And take some of the knowledge that you learned today from Seth, because he's going to give you some really usable steps that you can take to continue fighting so that our elections can be free and fair again. And I don't mean to call her out, but I talked to Beth out front, and she really inspired me, because it sounds like I have met some really good grassroots warriors here in Pennsylvania that I go back to Arizona and I try to encourage people to emulate what you're doing here. Because Beth talked to me about the voter rolls, how cleaning the voter rolls is something that they took on themselves. If your elected officials are not going to listen to you and do what you want them to do, you do it. Because in Pima County, where I'm from, I had a voter, her ballot was voted after she moved to Texas. No kidding. The day that her address changed in Texas, her ballot was requested in Pima County. And when I went to the recorder and tried to call her out on that, I've sent 3 letters to no avail. But Seth and I are kind of going bigger, which I don't know how much we can say about it. But I've decided, with the help of Seth and another one of my colleagues, a representative up in Maricopa County, that we're going to go to the feds. Because if you can't get things solved at the local level, or you don't have warriors like this that do it for you, then we actually have a DOJ, I believe, that will listen at this point in time. So fight, 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 just like President Trump said. Thank you so much for coming. And as far as, I warned you about the dad jokes. I'm not sure how much I'm supposed to intro my husband, but yeah, I will pass that to you, so let you take. But thank you so much for having us way out here in Pennsylvania. Thank you.
All right, Rachel, well, you were actually supposed to introduce me. I thought that was Doug, but it's okay. Because what I'm going to talk about is a lot more important than biographical information. And by the way, since you didn't introduce my dad jokes, do you guys know how to tell when somebody's about to tell a dad joke? It's apparent. Okay. That's enough of that. Did you guys know that the Keshel family has roots here in southeastern Pennsylvania? I have a couple cousins here, Colleen and Kenny. Would you guys please stand up? Come on. Don't be shy. And my dad spent a pretty substantial part of his youth here in Montgomery County. He was born across the way in central New Jersey. So we have I've got a heart for this part of the country. I love Pennsylvania. I've been all over this state since 2021. Some of you may have been at some of my events. I did one in Chester County in the fall of 2021. I've been way out in the west. I've been to Erie. I've been in the northeast. Haven't been in the heart of Philly except for the last couple days. In fact, it was Rachel's first time in Philadelphia. How many of you are familiar with my research in Pennsylvania elections since 2020? You may know that a key reason President Trump won Pennsylvania was because of substantial improvement in Philadelphia County. Now, there was improvement here, too, by about 16,000 ballots in the margin of defeat, which matters because that's going to be mirrored in Chester, Bucks, and Delaware counties, which are the other collar counties of Philly, as you know. I'm going to fall down this at some point, just so you know. All right, but President Trump improved in Philadelphia County substantially. Mitt Romney lost Philly County by almost 500,000 ballots to Barack Obama in 2012. That margin was 424, Trump versus Harris. What that means is there was a substantial drop-off of the minority, especially the minority male vote for Harris, which was a well-known issue with that campaign. Now, Joe Biden was stronger with the minority vote. Slight improvement with the white working class, which isn't really so much in Philly County anymore. That's a key reason why the president won the state in 19 key electoral votes. But there were several precincts I noticed in my precinct studies that in the 2020 election and the 2024 election went 100-0 for Joe Biden and then Kamala Harris, with 350 ballots counted in 2020 and 386 counted in 2024. 100-0, not 99-1, nothing for third party. So, you know, this presentation is not for conservative Republicans, Christians, MAGA patriots. It's for Americans, okay? It's for citizens to be here. And that's why I present the information the way I do. So I went to this precinct. I went to one of these precincts like this yesterday with Rachel. And I sat down with my data, and I talked about these trends and these numbers, 100% to 0. Sat there for about 30 minutes pondering if this is a realistic thing or not in this precinct. Didn't hear a peep, not one word of protest about what I had to say. And after that half hour, I got pretty bored, and I stood up and I left that cemetery. Welcome to my presentation about fighting for fair elections in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. I'm not here for you to leave bored. Make sure you think of questions that you have, because I believe there's a Q&A at the end of this, right? So you're going to get a chance to take your pot shots if you have any to take. If you're here and you feel like a fish out of water surrounded by people that you don't agree with in the world, that's okay. This is open source information. So like your friend who was debating whether or not we wanted to discuss this topic, one of the key disciplines of military intelligence work is OSINT, open source intelligence. 70% of what the enemy knows about our forces is stuff they find through open source intelligence. It's not classified. It's not sourced through human operations. They find it right there on the cover of the New York Times, or they read about it on Facebook. Soldiers posting selfies in front of the chow hall. Now the enemy knows exactly what angle they need to launch that mortar at to hit every soldier possible. Open source intelligence. And if you're writing about this event, please talk to me later and make sure you've got all the details straight. I am not a retired Army captain. I hate that. I'm a former Army captain. I'm the guy that gets blamed for being mistitled. And another issue I have with articles being written without questions being asked is one time I was in Clark County, Washington. Anybody been there? Southwestern Washington State, right across from Portland. The Seattle Times sent a professional propagandist down the road to one of my events there. Washington State makes Pennsylvania look like child's play when it comes to electoral corruption. The only difference is it's not a key battleground. They sent a professional propagandist down the street to cover my event. It was a big event. Nobody's seen an event bigger, believe me. We've never seen anything like it before. That I can tell you. And he described me as a former military captain, which is correct but not precise. And then in the very next paragraph described me as an ex-Navy officer. So I was promoted 3 pay grades. And I texted my friend General Flynn, and I said, "Sir, I'm only 3 grades below you now." And another thing is he described me as lanky. I am most certainly not lanky. And I took great offense to that. All right, are the slides up, Andrew? Are we ready to roll? So military intelligence officers are skilled at PowerPoint presentations. I've got 479 of my best slides ready to roll after one more order of business now that we're talking about the military. How many veterans do we have in attendance today? Would you vets please stand up? All right. So for everyone else, this right here is called a challenge coin. It's a military souvenir of sorts. It's usually presented to soldiers, sailors, airmen, or Marines that have exceeded unit standards. They've done something particularly valorous or meritorious, had the best score at the rifle range, had the best PT score. And the commanders of units usually give these to soldiers as a memento. I've had several challenge coins made over the years. This is my 3rd coin. And it is made to commemorate my 2024 election prediction, which I called on several shows and the day of at 312 for Donald Trump and 226 for Kamala Harris. I wound up getting all 56 races for electoral votes right on the money. And I like to give these to people who are headlong engaged in this fight. And right now, before I get rolling, Rose, I'd like you to come up to the stage. So this lady here, in conjunction with Doug and Shield of Truth Network, had the idea to have me up here to Montgomery County. And around the time of the election, she became a founding member to my Substack journal, Captain K's Corner, which is one of the top-rated U.S. political journals in the world. Newsletter. Well, we can get y'all all signed up for that at the end, believe me. It'll be the best sales pitch we've ever seen. And Rose came to an event that I did in Vero Beach, Florida at the beginning of February, and I met her in person. And she said, "I want to have you up to Montgomery County." Now, this is the issue with the conservative movement, which I don't like the term, but we run away from where the battle is the hottest very often. Now, everybody wants to stay away from Philly and even the collar counties of Philly these days because you know what? Blair County looks really good. It's 80-20 for Trump. Let's go over there. But going after the margins here is going to guarantee that hopefully a MAGA-like party would control Pennsylvania politics. So I admire the fact that she wanted to set up an event here. And I wanted to bring you up here because without people like Rose, there's a lot that goes into planning events, and Doug will vouch for this. You have security concerns, you got drama concerns, you're going to get written about in the press. The speaker's going to take a lot of arrows. The people that set up the event, especially if something goes sideways, are going to take some shots too. All right, then you have the lonely task of leadership, which is equipping people with information, knowledge to go out and wage war. Peacefully wage war. Peacefully. Write that down. And I wanted to bring you up and recognize you for your contribution. Yeah, thank you.
I just want to thank the team and my husband, Paul. And thank you, Seth.
And thank you, Paul. Okay. Now that introductions are out of the way, I want to tell you what we're going to discuss. We are going to get into a national level overview. The 2024 election was very valuable. So if you've been following my work since 2020, I spent 4 years talking about why I believe the 2020 election was, calling it third world is basically an insult to third world countries. Right? Then we moved to a different phase. Now elections are no longer about vote getting, they're about ballot collecting. And that's a serious problem because that's not what elections are supposed to be about. The person I heard that from is somebody who fell out of favor with the Trump camp named Brad Parscale, Trump's original data guy. I did an event with him a year and a half ago in Los Angeles. And we were talking about 2020, and he made a delineation between messaging states like Texas or Florida, where in Florida you have this massive Republican wave. It's because the minority working class Democrat, anti-communist vote, became a hardcore populist economic and America First vote overnight. They've run out of voters. And then you have balloting ballot collection states like Pennsylvania, thanks to one of your laws that was passed in 2019. States like Michigan, states like California, where early voting turns into the equivalent of an adult Easter egg hunt. So you have quasi-elections here in Pennsylvania. But until things change, you have to deal with the system. So that takes understanding the politics behind where you're going to gain new votes, like President Trump in Berks County with the Puerto Rican vote that was not offended by Puerto Rican jokes, by the way. And then dealing with the Philadelphia ballot collection apparatus, which absolutely exists, and it exists on the western side of the state in Allegheny County in droves. It's action-oriented. If you leave here with a head full of knowledge and don't get plugged in, don't understand what needs to happen here in this county, you need to take back this county, Lehigh County, little by little, locally. So the Democrats in this state and every state, when they were a minority party everywhere in the 1980s, began taking back county offices, county sheriffs, county commissioners' races, and then little by little worked their way to the top. Strategy has to happen, and that's why I'm here. Without further ado, let's get into the slides. Andrew, slide. Or would that be Annabelle? All right, I've had the pleasure to meet President Trump on 2 different occasions. This is us in 2023, where he's very recently announced his candidacy. It's pretty great to know President Trump. It's also pretty great to be able to get in there and work with his team. I've been in the White House twice in the past month and a half talking about strategies for cleaning up elections. Not with President Trump, for anyone writing an article about that. Slide. The map on the left of the screen, that was my prediction for November the 5th, 2024. I made it the day of. It's time stamped if you want to question my claim. And this was 3 weeks after the New York Times decided that I needed a feature piece for being the only forecaster out there that combined traditional analytics like voter registration by party, didn't care about polling, and had my own proprietary measurements for state by state and county by county ballot stuffing. Of course, it was mocked and widely panned by the commentariat online. People that said if he gets anything right, it will be because of luck. I'm still waiting on Logan Phillips from Road to the White House to make a new comment about that. But it turned out to be exactly what happened on election night, the day after the election, the day after the day after the election, and the day after the day after the day after the election. By the time all 56 races for electoral votes were counted. And by the way, California flipped a few U.S. House seats close to Christmas time in December. This is why I believe that our country is suffering from a serious issue, which I will describe shortly. Slide. Oh, and there's been no new piece issued about my perfect prediction by the New York Times, but I have had cartoons printed up that I'm going to send to them to decorate their hallways with. I have made my own proprietary maps and metrics that have been widely discussed on shows like the Sean Spicer Show. Newt Gingrich has become a recent fan of my methodology, and he's been a major help in getting me connected to people that can actually change things at the national level. These are my relative evaluations of the 2024 presidential election quality. Everything I do is relative. Even playing field, trying to make everything make sense on the same sheet of music. The top 10% of states receive the worst rating. That's 5 states. You'd be shocked to know that Pennsylvania, based on a combination of its election laws and proven cheating, there is proven cheating. There was a victorious RNC lawsuit in Bucks County that absolutely confirmed that the county suppressed Republican voters on early voting. Does anyone remember that? That was the power of social media at work. Pennsylvania, as you may know, is a rapidly reddening state that between 2017 and 2020 had a 21-to-1 Republican Party over Democrat Party voter registration advantage by party. 21-to-1. Right before a record-setting Democrat vote increase on top of a record-setting Republican vote increase in the same election. And if you don't believe me that Pennsylvania is still rapidly turning into Ohio, look at John Fetterman and every statement that he puts out or every vote that he's made lately. He's the only prominent Democrat in the federal government that is willing to go against the party. And by the way, if the Democrats ever wanted to take back Pennsylvania, it would be extremely easy. Just go back to supporting working class policy. Done. But they won't, because they're led around by the national party. California is the only non-battleground presidential state that made my worst list. That's simply because of the late counting that flipped U.S. House seats in the southwestern part of the state. Some of these states in orange, if they were more important battlegrounds, like Washington State, would probably qualify for a red rating. And you will see soon on my slide discussing election law exactly why these states fall into these categories. Slide. This map, it's a bit granular. You may want to wait until the video of the presentation comes out. This helps me understand voting trends from 2016 to 2024. This is for the Democrat candidates, Clinton, Biden, Harris. Anything that is in dark green, Harris had fewer votes than Hillary Clinton. You could see major erosion of the Democrat support in heavily Latino areas like in South Texas, heavily black areas like the rural South, all throughout coal country in southeastern Ohio and West Virginia. And somehow in those blue pockets, most of Pennsylvania had Democrat vote gains in 2024 despite party registration shifts. Why is that? Does anyone know? Well, let's get a little more detailed than that because I'm going to tell you later. Harris only outgained Joe Biden in 6 states. 4 of them were presidential battlegrounds, and she had 98% of Biden's 2020 COVID-inflated vote count in Pennsylvania. Slide. The key findings for the last 4 years. I'm not here really to talk about 2020 anymore, but 2024, when paired with vote shifts in 2020, is extremely valuable. Slide. There are 3 key steps for states turning blue. The very first step to turn a state blue is to heavily manipulate and corrupt the voter registration process. How many people agree with that? So you've heard it for a long time about machines, or you've heard about mail-in balloting. Those are not the primary reasons that elections become corrupted. They become corrupted first because the voter rolls become corrupted. Slide. The first step for turning a state blue through the registration process is to usher in automatic voter registration. What happened in September 2023 from the governor's office? Josh Shapiro just simply said, not just motor voter. Motor voter has been around for a while. Josh Shapiro said, without legislative action, we're going to have automatic voter registration, September of 2023. Arizona has motor voter, but it's not automatic. You have to opt to register to vote. Now, what happens when you usher in automatic voter registration? Because it's presented to you as fairness. We're making sure underserved people are getting registered to vote, like it's difficult to register to vote or something. Any of y'all have any issues registering to vote? Anybody? So illegals is a topic. Somebody needs to ask that in Q&A. I don't want to get too far down the question hole, but that is something that's been really important in California politics. It's been busted all over the news. Automatic voter registration. Slide. In 2020, there were 20 states that operated automatic voter registration. Joe Biden won 18 of those 20. And the electoral split was 243 to 9. Sounds a little bit uneven to me. Slide. That is the field of states with automatic voter registration in 2020. Trump won Alaska, which allowed for citizens to be registered to vote if they sign up to collect the permanent fund dividend, which is their oil money, and West Virginia. 9 electoral votes. Well, and the 2nd congressional district of Maine. That's 9. Now, in 2024, 4 more states added automatic voter registration. Pennsylvania, which added it in 2023, Minnesota, Hawaii, and Delaware also went towards automatic voter registration after the 2020 election. Slide. Harris won 18 of those states. Now, Trump won Pennsylvania in its first election with automatic registration, pulled back Michigan, pulled back Nevada, and pulled back Georgia. So that's 6 states with automatic registration that Trump won, but the split is still really wide, 221 to 64 in the Electoral College. So what follows is one of the most perplexing maps I've ever made. Slide. The map on the right, those are electoral votes not under automatic voter registration. Trump won them 248 to 5. So if a state does not have automatic registration, it's on the right. The only state that Harris won without automatic registration is New Hampshire. And she picked up the 2nd congressional district of Nebraska, which is worth 1 electoral vote on its own. Does that jive to anybody? Or does that seem like causation to you, that automatic voter registration equals the likelihood of a certain outcome? Slide. Number 2, expand no excuse mail-in balloting. Amazing. Democrat candidates that lose Pennsylvania now have more votes or ballots than Barack Obama had in 2008, when he won the largest landslide in Pennsylvania presidential politics since Lyndon Johnson in 1964, in a state that is now, because of the trade issues and COVID, losing population with the Republicans at all-time record high vote totals. And you have Act 77. Slide. The pinnacle of mail-in balloting corruption is universal vote by mail. There are 8 states that operate universal vote by mail. What is universal vote by mail versus no excuse vote by mail? Universal is where every voter is mailed a ballot, or every registration on the roll is also provided a ballot. Got it? So it's like a water fountain gushing out ballots. I call it the shotgun blast. All the ballots go out in the mail. The problem is not every registration to which a ballot is attached or assigned belongs to a real person or who's only registered one time. And then there's weeks of early voting. In Pennsylvania, it's 50 days of early voting. 50 days out, the mail-in ballots go out. And what party is always sitting around not collecting them? Right? Well, there's reasons for that. Number one, most people don't trust mail-in balloting. I'm not here to debate Scott Pressler's methodology or anybody else's. I understand why President Trump called for mail voting and early voting. It was a narrative shift to make sure that Harris didn't have massive party leads in all the battleground states. Long term, we're not going to win that battle. We are not configured to out-collect Democrats in densely populated urban areas. 6 out of 8 states, slide. 6 of 8 states that operate universal mail-in balloting went for Harris this year. In 2020, it was 7 out of 8 for Joe Biden. The electoral split was 96-6. Slide. And there's 6 out of 8 went to Harris. Slight improvement for Trump because of Nevada coming back to the Republican Party, but Sam Brown's Senate seat, after several days of counting in Reno and Las Vegas, went bye-bye. Slide. There's your map of universal mail-in balloting states. And as you know, there's been a major push in Pennsylvania to make it universal mail-in balloting, which hasn't gone through, fortunately. Slide. And then number 3, this is the secret sauce for making the mail-in balloting and the registration corruption really come alive. It's the ballot harvesting. I remember laughing about ballot harvesting when I read about it in California. So Oregon and California were basically the kitchen for electoral corruption in the United States. Oregon brought in mail-in voting in 1998 for local elections, and then by 2000 it was presidential. And California, about 12 years ago, started with the ballot harvesting. Ballot harvesting is technically not legal here in Pennsylvania, but it's very hard to catch and enforce, as we know right now in Pima County. We have people that really look like they're collecting ballots and bagging ballots, but there's plausible deniability in a way, which means it probably won't go anywhere. But tell me this, if ballot harvesting is not happening, then why wouldn't we record what's going on at a drop box? You get recorded when you go to the ATM to pull out cash, and you're probably not stealing anything. So what's the problem? Slide. Now this requires a little bit of proprietary research, the ballot harvesting states. A lot of laws, a lot of states have very ambiguous laws, like Pennsylvania. Some states strictly forbid ballot harvesting, but absolutely have it going on, like Arizona and Georgia. And then you have other states that really haven't defined anything, but have no densely populated metro areas in which you're likely to have a lot of it. Slide. So in states that have widespread or legal ballot harvesting, it's more than likely a Democrat state by a factor of 2 to 1. Harris won the electoral votes of those 25 states, 199 to 103, or 16 out of 25. Slide. And this is the map of states in 2024 that either have legalized ballot harvesting, collection of mail-in ballots, or I can tell through precinct and county analysis, ballot harvesting is quite clearly being practiced. Slide. These are what I call the 8 cardinal sins of election maladministration. You can see the big 3 that I just talked about. Some of these also require a little bit of proprietary understanding, like unique corruption. For example, in Arizona, we have serious chain of custody issues with a third-party vendor operating out of Maricopa County that doesn't happen in any other state because it's unique to Arizona. We have prolonged counting. Some states allow for votes to be counted up until Christmas time, which, of course, it's very fascinating to me when you look at the United Nations website. They have guidance for world citizens to understand how third world elections are manipulated, and one of the key tells is that counting takes a long time and you're not allowed to watch. I didn't really think that we qualified as a third world country, but maybe we should send in the blue helmets to some of our cities. All right, then you have other issues like no voter ID. I don't think no voter ID is a reason why states vote a certain way. I just think it goes hand in hand with being unwilling to fix the major issues that corrupt our elections. And no, I don't think illegal aliens are voting. I think they're being voted for. I think their names get on rolls. I think mailed ballots go out. I think people with data and addresses pick the ballots up, fill them out, and put them in a box. The secret ballot in this way works against us. Slide. This is a difficult matrix for you to read from where you are. You're welcome to come a little closer. We can leave it up for a minute. These are the 31 states that Donald Trump carried in the 2024 presidential election. The second column, the election concern, is from the colored map I showed you of the 4 different tiers of states in the 2024 election, how they rank. And then I have the 8 cardinal sins of elections throughout the middle of that graphic. In the blue column, those are states that I believe were manipulated, either in the presidential or in the House results in 2024, and how many demerits, so how many X's we have in each state. Military term for you. And what we have is 53 total demerits out of 31 states. So about 1.6 demerits per state that Donald Trump won. Does this graphic make sense to you guys? You can see some of the states that he won, like Pennsylvania, have a lot of naughty marks on them. Then you have other states that fall into the green where the laws, this is about what laws are in a state's books and how the results tend to turn out. This leads me to believe that 2020 was less of a crazy flip of a switch than it was the product of several years of twisting election laws to create a certain ballot count in certain states. All right, now I'm going to show you the 19 states plus Washington, D.C. that the former border czar, 87 IQ Kamala Harris carried. Slide. Okay. You can see here that there are no states that qualify for a green rating based on what type of laws they have in their books. And you can see here a lot of X's, especially in that first column, automatic voter registration, ballot harvesting, universal mail-in voting. And you can see in the demerits column, there are 90 demerits over 20 states. That would be the 19 states and Washington, D.C. That means there's 4.5 demerits for every Harris state. So 1.6 for every Trump state and 4.5 X's per Harris state. It's about the laws that states have on the books. So while we've been running around talking about conservatism and all kinds of other nonsense, they've been making laws that allow for prolonged counting, 7 weeks of mail-in voting and early voting. I realize, by the way, I've been corrected on Pennsylvania terminology. I use early voting just as a coverall term. I understand in Pennsylvania you only have very limited in-person early voting. I'm referring to the 7-week window of mail-in balloting when I also talk about early voting here. The product is corrupt the voter rolls, send out the ballots, expand the amount of time in which ballots can be returned by real voters or people collecting ballots. 80 ballots per college kid for 30 ballots apiece, times 100 kids. Pretty quick way to put in 8,000 ballots in a county for a low cost, which will flip every local seat you have. These local races, go look at the race over there in Lancaster a couple months ago. That state house seat flipped by a couple hundred ballots. Slide. So the Pennsylvania problem, let's get local here in Pennsylvania. Slide. How does this work in an exercise? This is a carryover of my now infamous slides documenting the activities of these counties from 2004 through 2020 when I was showing these all throughout the state. This is updated for 2024. Look, so here's what you see. Amount of votes on the left by millions, 2.6 million up to 3.6 million, and across the bottom we have 2004 to 2024. I'm going to go one election at a time. The red dot is the vote total of the Republican nominee, the blue dot, Democrat. So that would be George W. versus John Kerry in 2004. On the bottom, you see 8.37 million registered voters. And then you can see there 5.77 million votes were cast, which is a turnout of almost 69%. Now, something you need to understand about turnout stats. turnout was traditionally calculated as votes divided by registered voters. So if I've got 2 votes that were cast and I had 4 people registered, my turnout is 50%. People that like to cheat with election data, like in Minnesota, it's now votes divided by eligible voting population. So that makes that number go down, and it's less eye-popping when somebody's got 92% turnout. That's Soviet Union level stuff. All right, so 69% turnout at 5.8 million votes in 2004. So what happens now? This is a close race. This is a 2.5-point Kerry win. This is Bush doing pretty well in southeastern PA, but weaker margins all throughout the middle of Trump country than we have today. Republicans in re-election years have always, since the 50s, have always run better in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin in re-election. And then it goes back left. So in 2004, there's the re-election of George Bush, followed by Americans being tired of the Iraq War, Americans being tired of the Afghanistan War, an economic collapse, a housing collapse, a stock market collapse, loss of belief in the American dream, you name it. And then the emergence of a very charismatic black candidate named Barack Obama, who still had the support of the Democrat white working class here in Pennsylvania and in Ohio, Michigan, all throughout, who had record minority support with a record turnout. He got the suburban vote, and he had the benefit of running after a president with a 25% approval rating. Slide. And now there is your result for 2008. That is the largest presidential margin in Pennsylvania since Lyndon Johnson's national landslide in 1964. The stats look very similar to the previous election outside of the margin for Obama. You've got 250,000 more votes, so just over 6 million votes counted. Voter registration is up to 8.75 million. That is the Obama surge. Now, party registration ran really hard to the left between 2004 and 2008. If you've seen my old slides, you know that Pennsylvania went from D+7 to D+14 in 2008. It was very obvious that Obama would win by a lot. Now what happens? The same thing that is still present in the state's registration shifts begins in Obama's first term, and it became evident in the 2010 Tea Party midterm. The problem is the GOP really didn't have it figured out. It was the Dems that were losing the white working class. Are any of you guys former working class Democrats? Maybe not in Montgomery. Okay, you are. Whenever I do presentations in Berks County or in Westmoreland County or out anywhere in central western Pennsylvania, all over the place, Trump's coalition in Pennsylvania is 2-time Obama voters turned into Trumplicans, combined with your standard conservative coalition. What happens in this first term is the Democrats lose touch with the white working class. That was the Franklin Roosevelt coalition that began in the 30s. They lost touch with the white working class. Slide. And here's the results. Not only in Pennsylvania, but you can see a trend line like this in Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, Iowa. Romney was so weak he couldn't even win Ohio or Iowa. People that want to go back to a kinder, gentler Republican Party would be very wise to remember that. Let's look at the stats. Well, this is Obama by about 5 points over Romney. Donald Trump running this year may have won the state. Romney's issue is he doesn't really have more votes than John McCain. He has a few more, not as many as George W. 8 years before. Obama is down more than 300,000 votes in Pennsylvania in re-election. 43 states became more Republican than they were in 2008. Obama was really a pretty weak incumbent. 8.5 million registered voters. Voter roll was smaller. Both parties lost a ton of registrations and 67% turnout. Now, we're going to flip a switch, and the Republicans are going to nominate a guy who can communicate to the 2-time Obama voter throughout the heart of Pennsylvania. Slide. And there's your switch. This time it's Trump who has a gain of almost 300,000 votes. Trump is the guy that can gain votes as they lose. Clinton is down below 3 million votes. So the Democrats here are averaging about 175,000 lost votes per presidential election since that 2008 peak. We have 71% turnout, which is Democrats have lost votes, so clearly turnout is up because Trump recruited a whole lot of new voters. 8.7 million registrations. So look at the 4 elections along the bottom. We consistently have between 8.4 and 8.7 million registrations. Why? Because Pennsylvania's population is really only being fed by childbirth. The key reason Pennsylvania became a red state is because of the issue of trade. It wasn't social, cultural conservatism like you have in the South. It's not a border state. You have some conservatives, but you have this big realignment because of the key issue of trade that none of the GOP candidates before Trump really understood. And now the state has switched coalitions in 2016. So what would need to happen in 2020, based on these trend lines, for Trump to hold Pennsylvania, do you think? Continue to gain votes would probably be a good way to do it, right? Because the Democrats are already on a downhill climb. And I'm going to tell you that Trump is not going to gain 300,000 like he did last time. He's going to gain over 400,000. Slide. Does anybody think Trump can be stopped with a vote total like that in 2020? Right, so, but just if you're at a casino right now and I told you that this was going to be how many votes had in 2020 based on what I just told you, how much would you bet on Trump holding Pennsylvania? Slide. Well, that's what happened, is Act 77 happened in 2019, which allowed for Pennsylvania to have no excuse mail-in balloting for 50 days. And Donald Trump can gain over 400,000 votes, but Joe Biden just laughs and gains over 500,000 votes of his own. In a state that is losing new voter registrations 21-1 to the Republican Party. That was 242,000 net new Republican registrations to 11,000 Dem. Let's look at the other stats. 76.4% turnout at 9.1 million voter registrations. Now, if you think Pennsylvania was clean in 2024, anybody? Hopefully not. Slide. Now, this is Trump winning the state with another gain of about 150,000 votes, and Harris lags Biden by 2%. So Harris almost had Biden's vote total, except for 2%, thanks to the natural attrition of minority Democrats throughout the southeastern part of the state. 77% turnout on 9.2 million registrations. Honestly, I think two things happened. I think that automatic voter registration came in a little bit too late, because in Georgia, I can show you a state from 2016 to 2020 that had 4 years to generate new registrations, and that's why Trump lost Georgia. And I also think somebody that has his eye on the White House in this state probably didn't activate his ballot collection network in Philadelphia because it was better for him, for Harris, the left-wing radical from California, to lose his state. Now, that is theory. I mean, that is not doctrine, that's just theory. Slide. That is what the trend lines look like prior to the enactment of Act 77. And yes, that is about 600,000 to 700,000 ballots there on the far end, the difference between the ghost line versus the solid blue line. So I think that the changes to the mail-in voting system here allow for 600,000 to 700,000 counterfeit ballots. Yes, I think Pennsylvania is probably a very solid red state without this, like Ohio. Slide. So how do we look at this from a local perspective? Again, John Fetterman won't say a single foul word about Donald Trump. Because I keep hearing that, yeah, he won Pennsylvania, but he's not popular here. Well, you know, we really ought to support ICE. Like, that's the right thing. John Fetterman sounds way more conservative than Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, Tom Tillis. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if he switched parties prior to his next run. Speaking of party registration, Pennsylvania is now Democrats plus 2% voter registration lead. It's 175,000 registrations. It was over 1 million in 2012. The active voter roll is only a 74,000 Democrat lead, less than 1%. So Pennsylvania continues to move. And by the way, if you want to really drive home the point, it's going to be getting involved in southeastern Pennsylvania. A lot of the rest of the state is what I call maxed out. Right? This is the area that you're going to find the major gains. Slide. So I make maps. Intelligence officers love maps. This map is the Republican vote shift from 16 to 20 to 2024. All right, so if it's in dark red, the darkest red shade, like we have up in this area, that's a gain of more than 200 votes in a precinct for Trump in 2024 over 2020. The second shade of red is a gain of 100 to 199, and the pink shade is a gain but less than 99 votes. So if it's in red or any shade of pink or red, that's a Trump gain over 2020. If it's in yellow, it's a loss of votes from 2020. If it's in dark yellow, it's fewer votes than 2016. So you should be able to tell here, that the northern part of Montgomery County, of course, these are the only precincts that Trump carried out of 426 in the county, first of all. And it's the further you get away from Philly, the more conservative the county. That's not exactly rocket science. That's what you're going to find just about everywhere. Obviously, you'd like to have more say over what happens in local county politics. Right next door in Lehigh and Bucks County, you have the same shifts going on. You have a shifting of the county towards the GOP. Here, Montgomery County was one of only 3 counties that ran to the left from 2020, but in the last 6 weeks of the election cycle, it pushed to the right. Why is that? Because the areas you guys need to go after most, I'm going to get into them, are constantly receiving new residents. They're coming across from where? From Philadelphia. This obviously is one of the issues you have in a suburban collar county. It's not new to Dallas has the same issues. Pinal County, Arizona has the same issues. Florida's about the only state immune to this. Slide. Now here's the same graphic, but from a Democrat perspective. In blue, the darkest shade of blue, those are Harris gains of more than 200 ballots over Biden. Okay, the middle shade of blue, it's 100 to 199. The light shade of blue is a gain, but less than 99. And then in the green, those are precincts in which Harris underperformed Biden's vote counts. In that dark green, that's fewer votes than Hillary Clinton in 2016. So once again, it makes a lot of sense. You look down further south in the county. Now, your county is still really white, 76% white population in Montgomery County. The further south you go, you get about 20% Asian and black vote. Not really a lot of Hispanic vote here yet. Slide. And then I have my 2020 to 2024 precinct watch map. This is my assessment of the 2020 election and where the voter shifts are much different. This is consistent. So the map is angled somewhat differently, but over here on the southeast portion of the county, closest to Philadelphia, there was not much ballot harvesting going on. Just like in the core of Philadelphia, there was very little ballot stuffing going on in core Philadelphia in 2020. Very little. Trump had very hard trends in Philadelphia County in 2020. My research suggests it's all throughout the heart of the suburban counties and the more conservative counties throughout the state. York County, of course, being chief among them. Slide. So when we put all this together, look at that map. 67 counties mapped out by precinct. It's not very granular because we can't make it like that on a slide like this. Slide, but I can shrink it in. Slide, Annabelle. To southeastern PA. Look at the map of Philadelphia County. Everybody says Philly, 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 Philly. I don't see anything really with core Philly. I see most of the bloated voter trends. Obviously, Bucks County is nice. But all throughout the areas around the core urban area, the suburban area. Slide. These are the areas in your county, based on the shifting and based on the minority voting trends, especially, or based on dual gains by both parties, that I think are likely being stuffed. And I think that most of the time you find it coming in from other urban areas. Cumberland County, very close to Harrisburg and Dauphin County. Urban areas branching out into other counties normally find it on the flanks and periphery of other counties. I think that it is most likely that you're finding the dense areas, apartment complexes, universities are another area, State College, Pennsylvania, where you're finding likely ballot stuffing areas. So modern elections requires you to understand where people are using a 7-week early voting period with increasing numbers of mail-in ballots going out and finding ballots in densely populated areas and apartments. I can show you graphics of apartments in Wisconsin, Dane County, University of Wisconsin, 38,000 students, with a 23-to-1 registered voter to apartment unit ratio, 2-to-1 registered voter to bed ratio, all throughout the nursing homes. It's a very simple solution. It doesn't require a lot of people working on it. Slide. Then we have areas for political engagement that has nothing to do with theories or beliefs about ballot stuffing. Where do you get progress from? Okay, we have maxed out conservative areas all throughout the state. Hey, the same people are going to show up with their party affiliations, which you can monitor by voter registration by party. But the key areas of this country where Trump made his biggest gains, like Miami-Dade County in Florida, lost it by over 300,000 ballots in 2016 and won it by 125,000 in 2024, is because he took their voters. Pennsylvania is still a Democrat registration state. It's getting to the point, if the trends continue, that a standard Republican could win here, like in Ohio. But Trump was at least 10 or 12 years ahead of his time for being able to carry this state. It's a very tough state to win because you got two very dominant urban areas. And until Trump, you had a very finicky vote throughout the heart of the state that may not show up. But where should the Republicans or patriots in this county engage? To me, it's obvious. You have to continue in the northern part of your county feeding the base and engaging in blocking and tackling like voter registration and turnout operations. That's common sense. But if you want to get beyond 38% of the vote in this county and start forcing them to spend money to defend these seats, you need to get down in the south. You need to get down in Lower Marion. You need to get over in Abington. Now, I checked the presidential stats. Abington is 2-1 Democrat. Lower Marion is almost 4-1 Democrat. But you have a lot of Asian voters in Lower Marion. You have more minority voters in Abington than you're going to have throughout the heart of the county, and they are increasingly disenchanted with the Democrat Party, who no longer seeks to serve their needs, but the needs of a coastal elite, which is why the Democrat Party doesn't understand that Pennsylvania simply wants its jobs and its factories to stay here, wants to be left alone, and wants to see future generations prosper, does not care so much about what Californians or folks from New York City leading the Democratic Party want. You have to get involved in the areas you're losing, okay, and chip the margins. You won't win straight away. But if you continue to shave margins off of presidential elections and statewide elections, you can play a pivotal role in electing good candidates at a statewide level. They always go after Republican areas no matter what. They're always fielding candidates no matter what, and then when our folks don't turn out, you have results like you had there in Lancaster County a few months ago. Slide. Now, true election integrity. Rose about melted down over this slide here. This is a vision. All right, one of the beautiful things about the 2024 result is that it has spun off left-wing election integrity groups that really sound like a version of me on the left 4 years later. Well, this trend doesn't make any sense. We've never seen this result before. And people worry about it, and honestly, I say, come on to the party. It's like Bruce Willis in Die Hard, welcome to the party, pal. Where have you been? I invite anybody that wants to look into our election system because transparency, or the lack of transparency, is why people don't trust the system. Rasmussen reports in 2024 said 5 out of 8 Americans, 62%, don't trust the system of elections. It's because of these cardinal sins that I showed you. All right, counting votes for weeks. Does anybody think that's acceptable, regardless of who wins? Does anybody think that the public should trust elections that have 7 weeks of early voting with mail-in ballots? You know, I like to tell the parable. You veterans would appreciate this. Every 4-day weekend in the military, it's pretty well known as like a natural law that there's a really good chance of 100% unit urinalysis the day after a 4-day weekend. Because they're always going to catch some soldier, sailor, airman, Marine smoking weed on the weekends. Or maybe doing something worse than that. So it's well known on a 4-day weekend, it's like behave yourself, do not do any drugs, because every soldier in the unit's going to have to pee in a cup. I'm in the church, so I'll tame this down a little bit. But you get the cup, and they put your sticker on it, and you, even if you're an officer, you're carrying your cup like this on your shoulder, so everybody can see the cup. Then you're delivering the sample, and if they're doing it right, they're going to watch you deliver the sample. And then you're going to carry it like this. And why are we doing that? It's to make sure that nobody else's sample is in your cup. Can you imagine soldiers that requested their battalion commander to mail home the urinalysis test? And would anybody ever allow for urinalysis tests to be mailed out? It's the same way with a ballot. How could we ever allow voting materials to go in the mail? Now, I'm going to stop my soapbox on mail-in balloting because until things change, we're going to have to deal with the system. These are the 10 points to true election integrity I've been talking about for more than 3 years. This is possibly a pipe dream, but in the future, if we ever do have secure elections again, and by secure elections, I don't mean Republicans win. I mean the public trusts the results. You know, like I've taken a lot of heat from election integrity people for not believing certain things. I don't believe President Trump won California, but there's a lot of people that say that he did because of all the yard signs, right? That's not a coherent argument. I can sit next to anybody and discuss these swing states and talk about the changes in the laws and start a reasonable conversation. And it's why, more often than not, when I give an interview to the mainstream media, who I will always give interviews to, somehow they decide not to publish my interview. And it's not because they don't want to take a chance to dunk on me. But here's the deal. These 10 points would solidify our elections. And it begins and ends with number 1, cleaning out the voter rolls. North Dakota is the only state that doesn't have voter registration. And the way they handle it is you show up at a precinct with an ID and you vote. They have absentee ballots, which is, of course, different than no-excuse mail-in ballots, but you have to have ID. Banning all electronic voting systems would increase our transparency. Right now, you're voting into a box. You're voting into a box. Is the total coming out right? Well, I don't know. Does the computer have your total? Does it have your vote exactly like you wanted it? There are people on the left that believe that electronics have corrupted our elections, and indeed, before the 2020 election, this isn't sour grapes, before the 2020 election, it was Democrats complaining about the machines. Go watch the movie Kill Chain. Watch it, Kill Chain. Look it up. Number 3 is to enforce voter ID, ideally with paper ballots at the precinct. It's a shame to me that so many states don't have voter ID, but you have to show your ID to get on a plane. You have to show your ID to rent a car. You have to show your ID when you're pulled over by the police, but somehow it's a racist thing to expect for everybody to get an ID. Number 4, severely restrict mail-in voting. In my opinion, we should be more like the European countries that either have no mail-in voting or restrict it to deployed military or the legitimately disabled. I mean, I went to breakfast this morning in person. I bought this blazer in person. I bought these ostrich boots in person. When I go to the gym, I go in person. Somehow, every other year to go vote once or twice is an inconvenience. Wonder why. Number 5 is to severely restrict early voting. Pennsylvania is a key point, 7 weeks of early voting. 7 weeks of early voting. With so many small townships, boroughs, and census areas all throughout this state, every time I drive through Pennsylvania, I find a new town I've never heard of before, named after a guy that owned a windmill somewhere. Number 6, smaller precincts. That's going to be required to integrate this. You have to have places where 1,000 people can come cast a vote, so you don't have 15,000 folks in one precinct in Maricopa County trying to show up. So slow and steady wins the race here. Number 7 is to ban ballot harvesting. A lot of states have banned it. There's almost no way to catch it, no way to enforce it. But ballot harvesting is the secret sauce for dialing up turnout through mail-in voting. So when a party no longer has support, like a party that loses voter registrations in Pennsylvania 21-1 from 2017 to 2020, or the state closes from D+7.5 to D+3.5, like it did in the 4 years leading up to 2024, the only way to amp up balloting is to send as many out in the mail and spend 7 weeks slamming the ballot box. Number 8, Election Day is a holiday. I think everybody should be able to support this, provided that it comes with the previous points going with it. We have a holiday for just about everything. How many of you have been to the post office and you need to send a piece of mail and you tug on the door and it's locked? And you look at the door and it says, it's Bill Smith Day today. No. By the way, I pulled that joke one time and there was a Bill Smith in attendance. So, I think that most Americans will support the idea of Election Day being a national holiday with limited windows of early voting for those who legitimately cannot turn out on Election Day. I have no idea in my mind that is geared towards stopping legal citizens from casting a vote. All right, number 9. New transparency rules, primarily no more prolonged counting, no more once every 4 years failures, leaky urinal pipes. Honestly, this is the dog ate our homeworks of our times. And number 10, heavy prison sentences for those who commit election fraud. I think we could all get behind that. All right, slide. Rose, I hope I didn't disappoint you. This was aimed towards you getting involved. This is, in my opinion, the most important domestic issue that we have. Now, why do I say that? Why would I say it's more important than border issues or trade issues? Because having elections people don't trust brought us the office holders who made the stupid decisions that just have destroyed our country in 30 or 40 years. So without fixing elections, repairing elections, I should say, repairing the public trust in elections, we're going to continue to suffer under bad policy that nobody can really assure you. You know, we can talk about the 2020 election until we're blue in the face, what states should have gone this way, what states should have gone that way. I can talk about House and Senate seats, but I have never been able to get into the data enough, since local politics is so local, to discuss what possibly could be the impact on state House races, state Senate races, sheriff races in cities and counties that are now overrun with crime. If we don't trust the elections, that is a massive problem in a country that fancies itself to be a constitutional republic. So I've been here for 4 years. People are going to write hit pieces about me until I stop talking about elections. There will probably be one about this event right here. And I invite whoever has an issue with that to discuss this anytime, any place, and anywhere. And we'll continue to talk to the people who still don't trust the way elections are handled. So it's up to you, though, to get involved. Rose is an example of somebody who's gotten involved. Rachel told you her story. I'm extremely proud of Rachel. You know, I don't know if she shared this when I was in the bathroom, but I'm a fisherman now. And she's the catch of my life. She is widely respected in her office and has a lot of people who don't share her political views and who sit on the opposite side of the House chamber who come to her for advice. She's not owned by the lobbyists. That is the key dividing thing. It's not the ideologies anymore. It's not really even the parties. It's who owns our politicians. Who owns the people that craft election laws that leave citizens in the dark guessing. I'm glad that people on the left are upset about the last election. I don't share the same reason to believe that they should be upset about it, but if they're upset about elections and we're upset about the way elections are run, and we can get back to something that made sense, you know, like we might have had in the 1990s, not so long ago, then I think we'll be a lot better off. So I hope you've learned something today. That QR code goes to Captain K's Corner on Substack. It is the number 73 U.S. Politics Journal on the platform. That has been, I started it in 2022 when I was speaking at 4 events a week, and I didn't need the income. And now I speak at a couple events maybe every 6 weeks. And that has been what has kept my mission alive. So if you find this presentation interesting and would like to support my work, I would appreciate your subscription to that newsletter. I write about 6 articles a week. Second, Doug has put his life into being an engaged citizen and getting other people to engage as well. Shield of Truth sponsored this event. And there are very few people that are willing to step up to the plate because there's a very real cost to standing up for the things that you believe in. And I think that if y'all appreciated this event and his time, he could do really well to earn your financial support to keep the mission going. A lot of people want things to change, but when it comes to what you give up, what you sacrifice, a lot of times that changes. I wound up losing a 6-figure career because I was irritated enough about the 2020 election that I couldn't watch it anymore. I couldn't stand the way this country was going. And I've seen a lot of people come and go when they thought that life as somebody with a big social media following was going to be an easy thing. So we have a pastor here. Now, the pastor of this church ought to be commended for opening up his church for an event like this. And if anybody ever tells you that you shouldn't organize for events like this, you should remind them that we enjoy free speech in the United States of America and that you never apologize for engaging in those things. You should also encourage people that you don't agree with to exercise that right too. There are a lot of countries where having a conversation like this would lead you to imprisonment. But even here, it may not lead to imprisonment, but it may lead to cancellation. You might have people post negative things about your family business online. You might have people fire you from your job. But ultimately, what's it worth to you if you inherit or give away a country that is no longer a country where people value freedom or value the ability to think for themselves? Our pastor that married us, Seth Keshel from Chicago, or from Illinois, west of Chicago, he stood up to the COVID mandates in Illinois. And one of the only churches in Illinois that refused to shut down during the COVID scam. And he always says that heroes do hard things. All we need is a few people to get involved if you're not involved. If you're sitting here listening to me talking, it's like, I really agree with this, but I'm not plugged in because it's going to take too much time. I got kids playing softball. I've got church going on. I've got work. It only takes a few of you to change the trajectory of where you are today. And he's one right here with Shield of Truth. And Rachel's another who stood up, ran for office. We've got a lot of great people here in this country. Human capital is our best capital. So I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you for your attention.